400 years ago, people in Holland were buying tulip bulbs for the price of a house, and those bulbs were dying. So one of the most sought-after assets at the time was a terminally ill plant. You may have heard of a cautionary tale called Tulip Mania, and if you haven't, no worries, I'll give you a brief overview. It involved an economic crash, bankruptcies, and greedy Dutchmen financially ruined overnight, all because of a single flower. It's one of the most famous stories in economics. Here's the problem though. It's mostly false. But the truth behind the myth is just as interesting. Welcome to the Goodish news channel. I'm Ashley, and while the regular news cycle gets a little more depressing every day, I rummage around in the dark for stories that aren't completely terrible. Sometimes I even find one. Charles Mackay was a 19th century songwriter, poet, and author. He wrote all about this flower craze that occurred in Holland in the 1600s. Apparently, tulip trading was all the rage. The Dutch had mastered the everyday solid tulip. But that wasn't good enough anymore. They wanted to jazz things up, and what's the best way to do that? Stripes, obviously. The stripes were exceedingly rare, but people were paying insane prices for them. In one of his books, Mackay tells the story of a hungry young sailor who is eating a herring sandwich. He sees an onion on a merchant's counter and thinks it would pair nicely with his fish. He happily eats it, but is completely shocked when the merchant absolutely loses it. It turns out that it wasn't an onion at all, but a very rare tulip bulb that was worth more than an entire ship's crew wages. The merchant is furious and has the young sailor thrown in jail. Mackay sold it as a factual story. Here's the problem though. Historians checked court records from the 1630s, and they didn't find any evidence that backed up the story. And as a side note, don't eat tulip bulbs. They can make you sick if they're not prepared correctly, and apparently they don't taste great, whether or not you're pairing them with fish. So our guy Mackay wasn't exactly using reliable historical sources. He translated old, hyper-exaggerated, satirical Protestant pamphlets meant to scare people away from greed, but he treated them like cold hard facts. Kind of like writing a news article based entirely on your aunt's Facebook comments. Not a great idea. His writings stuck around for centuries and people believed him. But there are some things that are true. For instance, this sought-after tulip was called the Semper Augustus, and it really did exist. It had white petals with blood-red stripes running through them. And I will say that these flowers are very beautiful, but those stripes weren't a result of masterful botany. They were the symptoms of tulip-breaking virus. The virus was spread by aphids. It then hijacked the plant's cells and destroyed the pigment, along with degrading the bulb itself. So the Dutch were tripping over themselves to buy a plant that was already half dead. I've got some half-dead plants I'll give you for free. Now, the tulip trade was a very real thing. The problem with it was the bulbs were buried most of the year, so nobody could trade physical flowers. They traded paper notes in the back room of taverns over beer. The Dutch called it Windhandel, or the wind trade, and it was called this because no real goods actually exchanged hands. Mackay claimed that everyone from chimney sweeps to royalty sold everything they had just to buy wind. Historian Anne Golgar went through the actual archival records, and she found that the whole trade only involved about 350 wealthy merchants, artisans, and aristocrats. No chimney sweeps were harmed during Tulip Mania, at least not by tulips. Normal Dutch citizens most likely weren't involved. The story goes that in 1637, a tavern auctioneer tries to sell a bundle of common bulbs. Nobody bids, and the tulip market freezes overnight. The bubble had burst. Mackay claimed that there was a national depression and ruined investors throwing themselves into the canals. And when historians checked the bankruptcy records, they didn't find anything. The bankruptcy rate didn't spike, and the Dutch economy didn't stumble. And why? It's because it was all wind trade. 350 ultra-wealthy guys writing IOUs to each other. People had committed to buying tulip bulbs, but in most cases, money hadn't exchanged hands. So while there were flower dealers who were very angry with customers who had backed out, nobody lost their livelihood. That we know of. And what it comes down to is the people who were involved in this trade, they could afford to lose some money. Annoying, but not the devastating situation Mackay painted it out to be. But why does a fabricated story like this survive for centuries? Mackay's book was a hit because Victorian society loved a moral scolding about greed. And maybe we still do. Today, analysts will still bring up Tulip Mania when crypto or tech stocks take a hit, blindly quoting a 19th century author who fell for 17th century satire. Basically, they're just your aunt's Facebook comments wearing a blazer and holding a degree. If you're looking for more Goodish news in your life, be sure to check out this video right here, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing so we can ignore all the bad news together.